Good evening, everybody. So we're just at 8 o'clock, so we're going to give it, maybe people are actively joining away, so we'll give it a minute or two. We'll begin. So good evening, everybody, on this miserable Wednesday night on the 12th of November. So welcome to our webinar on optimizing the dry period. So we're going to have two speakers tonight. First speaker, Elaine Dennehy, our own vet, Elaine Dennehy. So Elaine is going to talk about how to use the data. So how to use our milk recording data, looking at some of the ICBF reports, the milk recording reports, and also looking at how FarmOps, our own app FarmOps, can help with some of the big decisions around when to dry off cows and what to give them. And also then some of the herd criteria and individual cow criteria for selective dry cow therapy. And then in the second half, more of a practical session. So we're delighted to be joined by Gillian O'Sullivan, vet and farmer, well-known vet and farmer, and she's going to be given some tips from their own experience on drying off cows and selective dry cow therapy. So Elaine, I'll hand over to you. So just to mention as well, if you have any questions, so we love questions and interaction. So the chat box at the bottom, if you want to type in any questions, and we might even try and get them as we go along to keep it interesting. And we'll have a couple of polls along the way as well. So a couple of little questions to get maybe some insights from yourselves. So I'll hand over to you, Elaine.
Thanks, Dennis. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. So before I start to talk about the dry period and selective dry cow, I'm just going to give a quick recap on what is cell count. So I suppose cell count or somatic cells. So somatic means body cells, and somatic cells in the milk, greater than 98% of them are actually white blood cells. And white blood cells are actually part of the immune system. So because they're part of the immune system, they're a very useful indicator of intramammary infection. So when a little bacteria or a pathogen enters the teat and gets into the udder, these white blood cells move from the bloodstream into the udder, and that happens quite quickly. And then anything with a cell count of over 200,000 cells per mil indicates infection. And I suppose, look, 200,000 cells per mil might not seem like a very high cell count. But at the veterinary conference this year, there was a mastitis expert giving a talk, and she made the point that if you have a cow with a cell count of 200,000 cells per mil, potentially one of her quarters could have a cell count of 800,000 cells per mil. So it is significant. So then I suppose, what are the dry period goals as they relate to cell count, I suppose? So the first thing we want to do is we want to treat existing infections. And then as well as that, we want to prevent any new infections from forming over the dry period. So when you're treating existing infections, the target is a greater than 85% cure rate. So if a cow has a high cell count in her last milk recording of the year, you want 85% of those cows to have a low cell count in their first recording the following spring. And whether you reach that target of 85%, will depend really on the treatment decisions you make at dry off, and the culling decisions. So I suppose when you're looking at treatment decisions, you're talking about the type of antibiotic that you use, and that's where your cultures and sensitivities come in, and also your treatment protocols. So different groups of cows may require different treatment protocols, and we'll go through those in the next few slides. And then I suppose another big one is your culling decisions. So, and we see this quite commonly, herds not hitting their target cure rate of 85%. And a lot of the time what's happening actually is that they're holding on to these chronic cows that just have a very, very poor chance of curing. And you're maintaining infection in the herd by doing that. And then I suppose the second thing, preventing new infections. And I suppose the million-dollar question here is, do you need antibiotics to prevent new infections forming over the dry period? And I suppose, look, research has shown, and from farmer experience on the ground, that has also shown that actually, you know, if selective dry cow is implemented appropriately, and if you have effective dry cow management, that actually you can effectively prevent new infections forming over the dry period without antibiotics. But I suppose just a couple of important points for those cows, especially for everyone that's drying off cows, but especially for those cows that receive sealer only. Your dry off procedure, hygiene around that time is really important, and also your dry cow environment and the hygiene around that. But I'm not going to dwell on that because Gillian is going to speak about that later. And then I suppose the big thing then for assessing how your dry period has gone or how successful your dry period has been is to get in that early milk recording the following spring. So ideally, a cow should have her first milk recording within 60 days of calving. So now I suppose we're just going to put up a quick poll just to see how many of you have actually tried selective dry cow therapy. And Maeve will put that up there now, and look, we'll chat away while you're doing the poll. So I suppose the first thing with selective dry cow is assessing whether your herd is suitable to implement selective dry cow therapy. So I have some criteria listed here. Look, a lot of this is not black and white. Some of these are open to debate, but I suppose we do need criteria. So look, we'll go through them and we can talk about it anyway. So the first one is a bulk tank somatic cell count consistently under 200,000 cells per mil for the year. Look, that is important because look, if you're hovering above that 200,000 cells per mil, really the likelihood is that you have significant subclinical infection in the herd. You need at least 4 milk recordings. So that would be 4 milk recordings at a minimum. The more information you have, look, obviously the better it's going to be. Some chronically infected cows, their SCC can fluctuate quite a bit, so they can be low. You know, they can be low for one recording, they can be high for another recording, and they can fluctuate quite a lot. So look, the more information you have, the better. Look, some people are doing 6 recordings, some people are doing 8, and some people are even doing 10. And I suppose the great thing now is that for genotyped herds, we also have the Genocells. So, you know, you can do your 4 milk recordings, and then you can take 2 bulk tank samples and get your somatic cell counts of your cows from those bulk tank samples. And all of a sudden, look, you could have, you know, if you do 2 Genocells along with your 4 milk recordings, you have 6 points of information for minimal extra effort, really. The next one then is a previous successful dry period and a low recent infection rate. And I'll be showing you where to look for those points there shortly. And then I suppose the next one is enough space. So 1 cubicle per cow, ideally. Now look, you will have herds that will not have 1 cubicle per cow. They may be short a couple of cubicles, but because their dry cow management is so good and they're really focusing on their hygiene, they can implement selective dry cow quite successfully, and they do. And equally, look, you could have plenty of space, but maybe your hygiene maybe isn't as good as what it should be. And look, you mightn't be as successful. So I suppose we're saying a cubicle per cow, but that's really just to emphasize how important the dry cow environment is. And then the next one is culture negative for strep agalactia. So no evidence of strep agalactia in the herd. I suppose this point is probably also debatable. We see very little strep agalactia now. It is a contagious bacteria. Usually it's subclinical infections that it causes. But the thing with strep agalactia is that actually the antibiotic dry cow tubes are they're very effective at eliminating it. So they're the criteria for the herd suitability. We'll just move on to the next slide.
Now, I'll just come in with the results of the poll there, Elaine.
Oh, yeah.
So we have 150 people on tonight, so delighted with a great crowd. So 79% said yes, that they are implementing selective dry cow therapy to some degree. So
yeah, that's great. So this is your cell check report, and this table will be at the top of your cell check report, and this just shows you your SCC for the year. So the red line is the 200,000 cells per mil, the blue line is your milk recording average, and the black line is your monthly bulk tank average. So look, that's easy to follow, and self-explanatory. The next slide now will show where you can see about your recent infection rate. This is also on the cell check report in the middle of the report. So there on the left, your recent infection rate, you get both a percentage. So this herd here has 18% recent infection rate since the last recording. So what that means is that in their most recent milk recording, cows that had a greater than 200,000 cells per mil, 18% of them had a lower cell count in the milk recording before that. So they have picked up infection between the two milk recordings. So you want that percentage to be less than 7%, and it's there in graph form as well. So it's really easy to follow. And you also there on the right have the percentage of cows with persistent infections. Yeah, you can move on. So again, Maeve. So then how to tell whether your dry period has been successful, and this is actually really important. So this is at the bottom of your cell check report, and these are just two examples. So here on the left we have a herd who did have a successful dry period. So as I've said already, only cows that have had their first milk recording within 60 days of calving will be included in the statistics for this table. So this herd here had 42 cows when they went into the dry period with a low cell count. 4 of those calved down and had a high cell count in their first recording. So that's 10%. And the target look is less than 10%. Heifers are treated as a different group. There was 44 of those, and 3 of them calved down and had a high cell count in their first recording. So that's 7%. The target there is less than 15. And this herd has a cure rate of 89%. That's opposed to the herd here on the right, where you have 19% of cows picking up infection over the dry period. 21% of heifers had a high cell count in their first milk recording, and this herd only had a 63% cure rate. So these are very important statistics to keep an eye on. So now we'll just go through how FarmOps does it. So when you download FarmOps initially, you get a dry off plan. Now you can choose to opt in to selective dry cow if you want to. So if you choose to opt in to selective dry cow therapy, you will have a little questionnaire just to fill in. So that's here on the left. It will ask you, do you want to see if you have cows suitable for selective dry cow therapy? It'll ask you if you have 1 cubicle space per cow for the full dry period. It asks, have you had a culture and sensitivity which is positive for strep agalactiae? And has your bulk milk been below 200,000 cells per mil all year? So you answer those questions, and then it takes the answers from that, and it also takes your milk recording records, and it tells you basically whether your herd is suitable for selective dry cow or not. And I suppose the important point with the FarmOps is that I suppose really it's designed to be used in conjunction with your advisor or your vet. It really takes the heavy lifting out of it. So, if you're having a conversation with your vet or your advisor, you can take out the phone and you can do it then and there, and it's handy that way. So then I suppose if you've decided that your herd is suitable for selective dry cow, the next thing you need to do is to choose the cows that are going to get sealer only, basically. So there are a couple of criteria here. Again, look, some of them are open to debate, but we have to start someplace. So the first point I have is that cows that receive sealer only should have a somatic cell count of less than 100,000 cells per mil all year. Now that threshold will vary for herds. So look, if it's your first year doing selective dry cow, you may choose to lower that threshold. You can pick 50,000 as a threshold, you can pick 70. It doesn't have to be 100. And equally, herds that are implementing selective dry cow for a long time and are quite comfortable and confident doing it, they might up that threshold a little bit. But like I say, look, we have to start someplace. No case of clinical mastitis in this lactation. So I suppose, look, that's also where your records are very important. It's very important to keep good records of your clinical cases. So then your last milk recording or your Genocells as close to dry off as possible. And I suppose, look, that's another, we've seen a big uptake of Genocells recently with the lead up to dry off. And then look, I suppose some people do this, some people don't, but a CMT before you dry them off for the cows that are getting sealer only. I suppose, look, like I said at the start, cell count can change quite quickly. So, like you're never going to have a milk recording today and dry off tomorrow. There's going to be a lag period. So it's just an insurance policy, really. On to the next slide. So then I suppose if you're picking your cows for to receive sealer only, I know that Gillian later on is going to go through how she does it on ICBF, but I'm just going to show you in report form how you could do it. So this is actually a new report. This was devised for Genocells, but actually all herds, even the herds that aren't doing Genocells, are going to, this is available on ICBF for them. So this report basically gives you the last 6 cell count points of information. So be that 6 milk recordings or milk recordings and Genocells. So each cow is on this report, and you can see her whole history in a line, and now this report doesn't show it, but the way the cows are ranked in the report is by percentage contribution to the tank in the most recent test, and all their history is there. So the next slide there, Maeve. So then if you choose to use FarmOps, again, look, FarmOps has already told you that your herd is suitable for selective dry cow. So then it goes ahead and it tells you which cows are suitable to receive sealer only. So it uses the milk recording data and the clinical history that you've put into the app to choose the cows that are suitable for the sealer only. It'll tell you how many cows you have that are suitable for sealer only. You then can go ahead and choose what percentage you would like to do with sealer only. So like 50% of your herd might be suitable for sealer only. You might only be comfortable to do 10% or 20%. You have the choice to choose that percentage. And then the app will automatically pick the 10 or 20% most suitable. Move on there, so Maeve, yeah. So even if you're not doing selective dry cow, we just put in a couple of slides here because I think this is nice as well. So FarmOps will still give you a dry off plan. So it uses all your data, and it uses pregnancy scanning data. If you input that, it'll use AI serves, days in milk, and the age of the animal. It uses all the milk recording data. And again, if you're inputting your clinical cases of mastitis, and it personalizes your dry off plan, it'll give you a week, what week you should be drying off each cow, and it'll give you the treatment. It'll suggest a treatment protocol for that cow. And if we go on to the next slide, the treatment protocols are actually on this slide. So what FarmOps does is for normal cows, so cows that have had a low SCC all year with no case of mastitis, they're given 60 days dry, and they're given just a standard antibiotic and sealer. Problem cows then, so cows that have had a high SCC at times throughout the year, or cows that have had a case of mastitis, they're given 80 days dry, and the treatment protocol for those is a long-acting antibiotic and a sealer. And then you have a third group, they're vulnerable cows. So they would be things like first lactation animals or any cow that was scanned in calf with twins, and they're given 90 days dry, and then their treatment protocol is again based on their cell count history. And I suppose then, look, you can go ahead then and you can actually record your dry off treatments on FarmOps. And when you dry off a cow on FarmOps, that syncs with ICBF as well. And all of the treatment, so any of the dry cow tubes that you use, all those medicines are preloaded onto the app. All the withdrawal periods are included. And we just have an example here under the text of how it would appear in your Board BIA report. So it's you know it's good for Board BIA compliance as well. And then this is just the last slide now. I've touched on it, but it's important to have it in here. So these persistently infected animals, and what we're really trying to pick here are those animals that, are chronically infected and that have very, very poor chance of cure. If you keep those, you're maintaining infection in the herd, and look, they just don't cure. So what you're looking for here, so this is this red table here, this is in your lifetime report, and you get the last test of the last lactation, and you also get the average of the previous lactation, and you also get cell count information for this lactation. So what we would say is that any cow that has a high somatic cell count in 2 consecutive lactations, they are very unlikely to cure, especially if they're older animals. So 4th plus lactation animals, they're always more difficult to cure. So 2 lactations, high in those 2 consecutive lactations, and the older animals. Now, if you are keeping cows that are on this table, because look, let's face it, you're not going to be culling all of them, but those cows need, as we've said already, a long dry period and a long acting dry cow tube. And then that early milk recording next spring, look, we can't emphasize that enough, just to assess whether you've actually cured those animals or not. So that's it from me.
Great stuff, Elaine. There's a question there about the early milk recording in the spring, and how it affects the cell check report. So what is it that you must have? Your cows need to be milk recorded before 60 days to get into that report.
Exactly. So
and it really affects the data, because the percentages are one thing in that report, aren't they? But it's the number of cows. You need decent numbers.
Sure, listen, if you've only 10 cows, like 1 cow is 10%. So yeah, the more cows that are included in the table, the more accurate your information is going to be.
Yeah. And likewise, you could have a poor cure rate, but you might have very few cows to cure.
Yeah.
3 cows and 1 of them cured, the cure rate could be bad, but the numbers are so small, it's actually a very good thing that you've so little to cure. So you just have to be careful with the numbers and the percentages.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, sure, we might move on to Gillian, if you're there, Gillian. There she is. So I'm sure, will I do a little bit of an introduction for you, Gillian?
Where are we, Jen?
Well, most of you probably know Gillian. So she's a vet, and herself and her husband Neil run a very successful once a day milking farm down in Dungarvan in County Waterford. So they're well known. She's also a columnist on the Farming Independent. So I'm sure lots of you read her articles every week. Do you want to just fill in on the farm system, Gillian, before you take off on your own practical approach to drying off cows?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Elaine, as well. Some great information there. Just about our own farm, myself and my husband Neil, we're farming just outside Dungarvan, as I said, but we're about kind of the 90 to 100 cow mark, depending on the year, and we've been milking once a day for the last 16 years. And that milking system suits our farm layout, because the farm is very, very steep. It's on the side of a hill with quite a climb up to the parlour every day. So once a day is how we go about it. And I guess with the I guess we, over the last couple of years, when we're talking about selective dry cow here tonight, the big thing is that some people would say, oh, you're milking once a day, therefore your cell count is going to go wild. So, this is just to show that for a farm that milks once a day, we've been implementing selective dry cow for the last, I think it's probably 4 years now. And every year we're getting that bit more confident with it. So look, tonight I have both my vet and my farmer hat on. I hope that it brings a little bit of maybe practical and common sense and in our approach to how we put best practice, like Elaine was mentioning, how we put all of that into and turn it into practical steps and how to do it on your own farm.
Great, Gillian. I'll turn off my camera and I'll give you we'll give you full attention.
So yeah, as I said, the big thing for us is that when we think about dry cow therapy and how we used to go about it years back, it is it's more of a planned operation now. And for dry cow therapy and for selective dry cow therapy to be successful, we find that if we split it into 3 phases, so your planning aspect, your executions, that's the day of, and the aftercare afterwards. And each of those phases are, they're really, really important because each aspect of it will bring an additional level of success as we go along through it. So for the planning side of things, what we have it set up is it's in 2 phases. We have a desk work and cow prep. So this is the desk work, just like Elaine mentioned, your cow selection. And for me, I generally go on to ICBF, click view profile at the top, and go down to milk recording SCC. And look, when you pull that up and you stick in your figures that you want. So for us, we have our requirements for our herd. We stick at for the lactation under 100 and every test under 100. So we pull it all up and we put in those figures, and it generates a list of cows for us. And the next thing then that we're going to look at, because that is your master list, that's the list you're going to start out with cows who are suitable for selective dry cow. And what we do after that, we go back to our own herd records. So that is going to have the number of clinical cases that we've had in the year. Now, whether you use a farm diary, so you're writing on it, or whether you're using the likes of FarmOps, you can generate that list fairly easily. And then if you've got cows on that list who've had clinical case of mastitis, and if they're also on that list that has come off your ICBF records or your cell count records, you can knock those cows off. And the third reason to knock a cow off that list would be, in my books, if she has a very large awkward udder. So there's probably one, I can think of definitely one cow in our herd that just has a very awkward udder around calving time, and it's in my books is kind of a high risk udder. So I'm inclined to give her a dry cow tube anyway, because she just has such a large and pendulous udder around the time of calving. And again, these are I guess what you call is practical realities of dealing in with cow herds, that you just have to take some small considerations, practical considerations into account for particular cows. So once you have your desk work done, the next bit is cow prep. So that is, you have your list of cows and you're going to draft them out. But in the weeks leading up to this, clipping all those tails, it's vitally important, really it is, because as well as taking care of those hairy udders, because all that extra hair can hang on to dirt and feces, and that's just going to contaminate the area you want to work with. So when you do it early enough in the month, it allows time for all that contamination it's just reduced, and you end up with much cleaner workspace. So I was drying off with Neil last weekend, and I took most of these photos on the morning, and this was how the cows looked when they came into the parlor that morning. So what we do is the tails and those tails would have been clipped early on in the month. So when we have that's one thing out of the way. The next thing is that with our list, we're going to draft out the cows from the day before or the few days out, and reduce the energy density of the diet. So for us, what we normally do is drop down the meal and then drop out the meal. And that would mean, and even, sometimes we might have them on a more coarse or low energy silage, maybe a day or two out. And that just means it kind of switches off the drivers of milk production, and ensuring that they don't have they don't have that drive for having serious volume in the lead up to dry off. In terms of so that brings us down to the morning of, which is and we need to have a certain amount of equipment ready on the morning of dry off. Next slide there, Maeve, please. So our essentials, that's my essentials on the morning there, which is a head torch so that you can better see the teat ends, plenty of nitrile gloves, your list of cows that are getting either sealer only or a dry cow tube and sealer. And here's a pro tip, which is put the list in a plastic pocket, because A4 sheets of paper don't tend to last very long in a milking parlor, in my experience. So they just tend to get damp and flitter into nothing. So pop that sheet into a plastic pocket. The snacks are also essential, because you have to keep those blood sugar levels up to maintain your focus, to do a good job all the time. So firstly, on the morning, what we tend to do is we milk the main herd first, and then we get a quick cup of coffee, and then we're ready for the drying off. If you can see my hands on the left there, that was after milking. So washing down, wash down hands and arms, change the gloves. The parlor was filthy as well. You can see there on the left. So wash down the parlor as well. And that means you're starting from, you're starting in a clean environment. And you can see that, like, this is such, we can't stress this point enough, that hygiene is so important. Start clean. It's really, hygiene is a non-negotiable for this job. So we just, this is such an important aspect of it. So the cows come in there, and next slide there, please, Maeve. And this is the line of cows that come in. So you can see how clean the parlor is starting out there. This is the line of cows for dry off. The cows are clean and dry. The parlor is cleaned, and we're milking them all. So it takes for us we probably allocate about an hour to do 15 cows. That means it's about four minutes a cow in or about, and ideally you have help doing this, because and why is that important? Because it really helps maintain a high level of hygiene. If you have somebody to cap tubes or open wipes, or it just makes the job a lot more efficient. And it just helps flow around the cows when you have someone to work with you and help keep things clean, help maintain really high levels of hygiene. On the morning of dry off, we CMT, which is the California mastitis test you can see down there in the bottom right. We CMT the cows that are getting sealer only, just to give us reassurance that there are no recent infections since our last milk recording. And our last milk recording would have been maybe in the 3rd week in October, or the 3rd or 4th week of October. So as near to dry off as we can bring it. But that's our kind of fail safe, is to do CMT on the sealer only cows on that morning at the start of milking. So next slide there, please, Maeve. So while those cows are milking, what we have is we just pop up our list, that piece of that white, your A4 sheet in a plastic pocket, and we use the list to put the required tubes and wipes adjacent to each cow in the empty row. So either she's getting sealer and you've got your wipes there, or she's getting sealer and dry cow tube, and you put them there, which means that if they're laid out and down the entire line, you don't have to do an extra thing as you go. It's all ready. You're just moving from cow to cow, and everything is prepped, ready and clean for you to progress efficiently down through the line. And as I said, after the milking, so that's ready to go. But after, as the clusters come off, all those teats are disinfected with teat spray as well. And then we can get started. So Maeve, yeah. So if you have a cow
Gillian, we might just come in there with our poll. We have a second poll.
Yeah, we've a poll there to do just around this one, which is, what is, just for anyone who's listening, what's the preference for you when you're drying off? Do you prefer to use cotton wool and methylated spirits, or do you prefer the packaged wipes that come with your dry cow tubes for drying off? and would just see what people are tending to use. So for us, we would use, maybe depending on the year, sometimes we'd be ready and have the cotton wool and methylated spirits ready to go, but I find the wipes are just as easy to use as well, especially if someone's working with you, because they can open the pack. But if you're working alone, maybe the methylated spirits might be a bit easier to use. I put up at the top there that restraint if necessary. So for cows that might want to dance around a bit, when you want to tube them, and you want to keep the environment as clean as possible without them dancing around the place and touching the top of the tube, then you might want to use a kicking bar. But equally, if you use a kicking bar, it might increase the risk of them passing dung while you're doing the job. So I guess it's a bit of a trade-off. So for us, the teats are scrubbed and disinfected with the wipe or the cotton wool. And this is important to me anyway, is to work with the disinfectant, and the scrubbing is working with the furthest away teats first and then the nearest ones, and tubing in the opposite direction. So that's tubing the near teats first and then the far teats last. And that order is important because it just ensures that the teat ends, once they're prepped and disinfected, don't have any other hand passes underneath to contaminate that teat end again when you work far to near and then near to far for the process. So afterwards, again, they're teat sprayed. You can see down there in the bottom right. They're disinfected again, and then we let them out to stand in the yard for maybe an hour after milking, just to allow those teat ends to just to close up. And the important thing then is when we're using the tubes, of course, the dry cow tube is infused into the quarter and massaged into the quarter, whereas the sealer itself, you're pinching the teat and just filling the canal. And I know, and again, this is a numbers thing. So sometimes if you had a lot of cows to dry off, and I wouldn't recommend doing a lot of cows in the day, because it does require fairly, it requires a really, really strong focus to do this. And, when tubes are coming fast, and if you drop your focus, you can easily mix up what you're supposed to do with each tube, because it's just tube after tube after tube. So that's why we'd recommend doing maybe small numbers, working like max probably 2 hours on before you take a break, or spreading out the work over a week, or getting a team of people to help you if you've got large numbers.
We have a result. Yeah, so the first poll was a bit like the presidential election. So this one is a bit closer. So 50-50, 49 dry cow wipes, 51% cotton wool. So half and half split. And as you said,
half and half. And I could go either way myself with that one. So the last bit is the aftercare, and this is I find this one really, really important. You can see there in the next slide the cubicles ready to go. And ideally, after dry off, you could put cows onto a bare paddock. So those cows that we dried off a couple of days back, we put them onto a bare paddock. But in the meantime, we've had must have 70 mil of rain that have fallen in the last couple of days. So that bare paddock isn't going to look very appealing. And we put them inside 2 days ago. We housed them. So being practical, and in an ideal world, sometimes cows have to go straight into cubicle house after dry off. And the big thing is hygiene. And again, I've been saying to people of late, if you think of your cubicle housing like Crow Park on match day, and you think of using the facility, so we say the toilet block or the cubicle block in Crow Park, and the big thing is that there's 3 elements that are going to impact on how pleasant an experience in using that toilet block in Crow Park is. 1 is going to be footfall, and 2 is going to be the cleaning team and the frequency that they're there, and 3 is going to be the ability of those facilities to remove waste quickly and deal with waste quickly. And we know that if any of those factors are impacted, that those things are not pleasant places to be. And if I asked you to live in a cubicle block in Crow Park with match day occurring every day for 90 days, would you be a healthy individual when you leave? And you see, that's if we put that as our framework to how our own cubicles are managed, I think it kind of brings to the fore maybe slight issues that might be there that need dealing with. So the big thing really is 2 weeks after dry off and 2 weeks before calving are the highest risk periods for infection. And so that means that once those cows are dried off and they go in there, they need those cubicles need cleaning twice a day. They need to be cleaned and limed twice a day. We can't just say, oh, it's dry off, let's go on our holidays and we'll do that twice a day stuff with cubicles in the springtime. It is super important to do it just right after dry off, that 14 days after dry off, to be keeping a really tight eye on hygiene in the cubicle house. Scrapers running 6 to 8 times a day, ideally, and oftentimes having those scrapers, having a bit of maintenance on those scrapers before cows go into the house, it just irons out any potential issues. Normally, if you've got a hydraulic scraper, it's always going to give you a little bit of bother some stage early on in the season, as well as around Christmas Eve and most days in the springtime. But they can be, it is a good idea to have a little bit of maintenance on them before you start putting cows in the house. But footfall is a massive thing. Having a cubicle per cow is at a minimum is very, very important. We know that footfall is going to really, really impact on the level of buildup of dung in the environment there, and the risk that brings to setting up problems around mastitis in that dry period. So that's I think that's everything on my side of things. I hope there's a couple of questions to come in there, and either myself, Elaine, or Dennis can cover them off. But thanks ever so much for listening.
Super, Gillian. There is indeed, actually, we have a nice few questions now. So we'll kick on through them. So I suppose the first one for you, Elaine, on Genocells. So two questions from the Hinchins. So how long does it take to do a Genocells test, and what's involved?
Yeah, so I suppose if you decide you want to do a Genocells test, you would ring the office. You get the bottle out in the post. So you get a pack out in the post. The bottle is included. There's really detailed instructions as how to take your sample, and you have to input the cows on the ICBF Herd Plus app as well when you take the sample. So all those instructions are in the pack, and also an addressed envelope. The bottle goes to Weatherby's, so free post envelope for you to post that bottle up to Weatherby's. The turnaround time is averaging about 9 days, so it takes 4 days in the lab. That's standard. That take 4 days for the DNA to be extracted from that sample. And I suppose, look, with postage and everything else, the average it's averaging about 9 days.
Okay. And the second question actually was about the bottle. Is there a bottle? So yes, there is, and the bottle comes out to you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Very good. So I'll make this one to you. So Gillian, Dave Halley, cows that have been identified as problems, should they be kept separate while you were waiting for sensitivities, or I suppose culture and sensitivities, to come back?
If they're identified as problems, I would be inclined to, as in, if you're deciding on whether to give sealer only or dry cow, or dry cow tubes, is that the question, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
If they're problematic, I imagine that they're going to be getting a dry cow tube anyway.
Yeah, so I'd say maybe it is a question around milking routine, maybe, or something like that.
As in, but maybe waiting on sensitivities for the type of antibiotic. Well, if it's for the type of antibiotic, I guess, yeah, waiting on those sensitivities and working with your vet on that one is really, really important, because the vets are, that they're the people who you're going to be getting your dry cow tube from, and they're going to be able to help advise you around that. But the generally for those, for those cows identified as problematic, they're going to be getting a dry cow tube.
I suppose if you're going to the trouble of actually taking samples, sterile samples, and getting culture and sensitivity done on those problem cows, the type of bacteria that comes back actually is useful to know as well. Obviously, the Staph aureus is going to be much harder to cure if they come up positive for Staph aureus.
I think in the springtime, though, as well, what you're saying there, Dennis, about those sensitivities, building that profile of not just waiting to the year end to find the bacteria, to have your sample sent off. Any cow that turns up with a case of clinical mastitis in February time, when you're calving cows, just take a sample. take a sterile sample of that cow and pop it into the freezer, label it and put it in the freezer. And either after the end of February, you might have one or two, or you might have a bunch of them, but you should probably aim for sensitivities twice in the year. The spring calving, because one end of the year feeds into the other, right? So what the infections that are cropping up in the springtime around calving time, oftentimes it might be related to how you're managing things in that dry and housing period. So it's important to have a good profile of what bugs are going on in your would say around that calving period. And that will feed into information to what you need to get the following dry at the next dry off. So again, we can probably, around waiting for sensitivities at the moment is what that question is asking for. So we can probably put that to earlier in the year if we need answers for those type of questions.
Right, to your preparation, you can have some of that work done much earlier. Yeah. Right. If a cow meets the criteria this year for selective dry cow therapy, but didn't last year, would you still go ahead with selective dry cow therapy?
I think look, on paper, you'd say yes, that cow would certainly, she'd meet the criteria, but I'd have a little bit of a, just as a farmer, I'd have a little bit of a hesitancy. On paper, it should be fine, but I would be a little bit, if she had a serious infection. If it was a mild case of mastitis the year before, it probably depends on the individual cow, but I'd be inclined to make a decision based on the cow. Yeah.
If she was a problem cow the year before, if she was persistently infected or something, I would say no, probably. But if she just missed out barely, I suppose it depends. It depends on the history. Could you comment on the importance of diet before and after drying off? So you kind of mentioned this already, Gillian.
Yeah, well, what I was saying was that we tend, like, the importance of diet. Your diet is going to drive your milk production, and if they're on a very high energy diet, that's going to have that productive engine humming coming into the dry off period, and we probably need to bring that engine back a few gears so that they're not, that they're, the target is to bring it down to below 12 or 15 liters. Coming towards dry off for an abrupt dry off. So changing down the gears in the diet in the lead up to it. Now, obviously not stressing the cow, but like maybe changing from more of a filling or more fibrous type, like a haylage or a hay or something like that, to switch off those I guess the drivers of milk production is how I'd approach it. What would you say, Dennis?
Yeah, I would. I think like trying to reduce the energy density of the diet, I think, is really important, because if you keep it fairly high and abrupt dry off, they're going to really bag up, and you have much more chance of leakage and much more chance of problems. So I would definitely, I suppose the debate there is how hard do you go on cows before drying off, and certainly you don't want to be too hard on them. You'd hear about straw. So I think what you're talking about there, Gillian, is very reasonable. Yeah. So
yeah, because drying off is a stress something anyway. So you don't want to double whammy them with stress of drying off and the stress and nutritional stress. But changing down the gears in the diet is probably the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. So, Elaine, is it normal for cows to have udders full 1 to 5 days after drying off? They have been on straw and a bit of silage 2 to 3 days before being tubed.
Yeah, sure. I suppose the most important thing there, Dennis, is probably just that, you're keeping an eye out for that there's no swelling or inflammation. And I think after that, it's probably fine. What do you think, Gillian?
Yeah, I would say that it is probably normal that they're. I mean, it's not great that if they start running milk. I mean, that's not ideal, because it means that maybe your sealers is been bypassed and it's a risk of infection. But if the udder has to go through a process of switching off, so it's going to fill up and then and then dry up. So we see that happen year in, year out. So it's a process that goes through. The big thing is, as Elaine said, there is, once you're being very vigilant for inflammation, swelling, looking like those cows are having, you know, are having clinical case of mastitis, that then we're in problem zone. But normally, you know, what the normal process is that, you know, that the udder has to go through that drying up phase, which is and that's what that involves. The kind of before they dry up, that udder is going to fill up a little bit to an extent.
Yeah, and you were talking about the paddock earlier on, Gillian, and certainly there is some cows that you'd probably, if you could, some cows probably need to go to a paddock more than others, or maybe even go to straw bed cows, that older cows maybe that really bag up, and the cubicle is very confined. So if they have to lie up in the cubicle, it just puts more pressure on a full bag, and you have more chance of leaking. So I suppose even with the bad weather, you probably prioritize certain ladies maybe to go out. Any viable alternatives to lime? We were talking about this before, and we find the cattle sometimes avoid cubicles even when clean, maybe due to burning of the lime, and others you hate to see them lying on the slats. Absolutely, that's it. So you're using yourselves anyway. You were talking about beforehand, Gillian. You're using the
I guess years back we would have used a hydrated lime, and I definitely found that as being incredibly harsh on teats. And I don't, like a hydrated lime is, in my books, might be a little bit too harsh for teats, especially with how teats would look coming into the springtime. We normally use a blend, and it's very, you know, it's I would find a blend of like a, you know, a master Cal, or there's lots of different brand names there, different, but a calcium or a lime blend, and it's they seem to work quite well, but they wouldn't be as harsh or as the hydrated lime.
Very good. Yeah. So we're back now to a follow-on question from the cows earlier on, the problem cows. So we have a bit of clarification there. So should they be kept separate at milking time? Yeah. Elaine, if you remember those cows, I suppose the high cell count cows.
Sure. Look, I suppose high cell count cows, ideally, in an ideal scenario, they probably should be kept separate from your healthy cows, just to keep your healthy cows healthy, and you keep the problem cows to last, to milk them last, so that you're not spreading mastitis in the parlour. But look, I suppose that's that's a practical call. Can you separate them? Are you able to do that? But yeah, that is an excellent way of preventing spread within the parlour, for sure.
What's the other options are? Even selective cluster dipping, certainly dipping the clusters after those cows. Yep, trying to prevent spread onto the following cows that are going to be milked with those clusters. Should teats be disinfected between dry cow tube and sealer? So we're into the practicalities now of actually tubing the cows that you were talking about there, Gillian. So your method anyway is far near far. So disinfect the teat ends far away, and the ones closest to you second, and then the reverse when you're tubing. So you're not rubbing off the disinfected teat ends.
That's our approach, Dennis, and disinfecting between dry cow tube and sealer. I'd be kind to think that when you've done the job right with your wipe or your methylated spirits, now your teat end is ready to go. So you're going to put in your tubes there. Probably the big thing about putting in the tubes is that you're not putting the whole tube, the whole like the whole neck of the tube in, that you're putting in the tip of the tube, and the next one is going to follow after that. So it's not like, it's going to be reasonably quick. I wouldn't bring in the disinfectant between the dry.
What's the one place that it might fall down is if you put up your antibiotic and pinch the end of the teeth to massage up the antibiotic. I suppose you could potentially contaminate the teat end if you're catching it really low down, So I suppose when you're pinching the teat end to massage up, try and keep away from the real end of the teeth, that you're not contaminating it again. We're getting really nitpicky about it, but I suppose to get on well with this job, we need to be nitpicky, really, don't we? Into his detail. Right. Is it okay to warm the tubes before infusion?
Not in hot water anyway.
Yeah, so that's the big one there. So what do you do yourselves? Do you keep them at home that night, or keep them in the house, or keep them? I know your yard is away from the house.
Our yard is away from the house. Generally, we'd probably bring them to be in the at the house overnight, and then we'd bring them over with us to be normally a fresh box of tubes that we're bringing. But we certainly have left it over there. It's never too much of an issue, and we wouldn't be on a warm in a warm spot at all. But I have heard that some people found it easier when they were warmed up. But yeah, just not putting them into water.
Yeah. Should cows that need regular wiping when coming into the parlour receive a dry cow tube? Need regular wiping when coming into the parlour. Sure about that question now. Keep
I
make
suppose
sense of it.
the thing with, I suppose, if you have any cow that you're a bit unsure of, I think you just give her the dry cow tube, don't you? You just give her the antibiotics, you know. I think you have to be really confident with the ones that you're giving the sealer only. If you think there's any reason at all that, you know, she might be higher risk, I think you go ahead and you give her the antibiotics.
Yeah, I would agree. So I've never removed udder hair. Would you recommend flaming the udder?
That's one for you, Dennis.
Yeah, so we're working with a robot here at home. So this is something we do fairly regularly during the year. So it is kind of a daunting job, I suppose, when you do it for the first time. But if you have the right equipment, it's actually, I find it now a fairly easy routine job. So the big thing is to keep moving with so you have a naked, I suppose, flame. And the big thing is to keep moving. You know, you can see and not stop in one place. And if you do that, cows, they don't even notice that you're doing it, you know, once you keep moving, and maybe go around twice or something. But I think it's a super job. It really helps with the hygiene. So what's the reason with the robot is because the laser and the attachment and all the rest of it. But as regards, I know a good lot of people now doing it routinely, and especially coming up to dry off, and it is a good job as regards hygiene. So if you're carrying some high SCC cows and want to milk them into the tank, how confident should you be of the cluster flush system will isolate her problem while you treat the cow? I suppose maybe the question is how confident would you be in the cluster flush that it'll stop the
spread?
Stop the spread. You have a cluster flush, Gillian, you do?
We do. I do like the cluster flush system. It does give peace of mind, all right. And I would, but would it be 100%? You know, I wouldn't. I don't think you could bank on it being 100%. But it certainly does reduce the bacterial load for when it's flushed. So the first round of it, the cluster flush system we use has got 2 cycles. So one is your diluted peracetic acid mix, and you get a big. That's when the ACRs come on. This is flushed through it, and the second is water to flush, just to flush the peracetic acid out. But I don't think it would be 100%. But it does certainly make a difference and help.
Very good. Yeah. So we still have a nice few questions, but sure, we'll keep going. We'll get through the most of them if we can at all. So if you get results back from the lab, so these are milk samples gone for culture and sensitivity and showing no growth, why does this happen, Elaine?
So look, they just haven't isolated a bacteria. So and I suppose this is why you don't rely on one sample, or you have to take multiple samples, because the other thing we see as well is contaminated samples. So a load of bacteria will grow. So look, it just means that there's no bacteria in that sample. So maybe there was an infection there and it's cleared or whatever. But like, this is why, as Gillian said earlier on, even start taking your cultures and sensitivities, your samples for cultures and sensitivities early in the year. And just don't be waiting until the last hour to do that. But yeah, look, you're not going to strike gold with every culture and sensitivity. So, you need to really send a few samples.
Yeah, I can go one extreme from nothing, and The other extreme is if you're getting a load of bacteria that are coming from outside the udder, so bad technique taking the sample, so it can go both
Which
ways.
is probably more common, actually.
Yeah. So the one thing I'll say is you're doing a very good job taking your sample, because if you're getting no environmental contaminants. But I suppose a big thing there maybe is selecting the cows. You mentioned a group there at the start, Gillian, of cows that are getting actual clinical cases. And another group I would say is when you get your milk recording and the high cows that come back, if you could CMT those cows, find a quarter, and if you do find a high quarter, and you don't always, they might have to be self-curing, and you mightn't find one, but if you do, I think those cows again are gold. If you find a high quarter in this on the CMT after a milk recording. If a cow leaks milk after drying off, should they be sealed again and get another dry cow tube? Takers. So I'd be inclined to monitor them, keep an eye on them. Yeah. Obviously they're at a higher risk of maybe getting an infection or something going wrong, but like it does happen. Where milk comes out down around the sealer, or the sealer has embedded in and has gone up. But certainly I wouldn't be tubing them again with antibiotics. You could potentially reseal them, but I'd be inclined to monitor them and really watch the hygiene. Opinions on teat sealing heifers. Do you do this, Gillian? No.
We teat seal heifers, we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be, I don't think it's popular opinion from other vets, but I think that if you have a little bit of heifer mastitis, and sometimes it can be a reflection of older cubicle housing. And when like heifers are going to be that little bit smaller when they go into cubicles relative to cow size. So when they, like I was in my own cubicle house, say we housed dairy and calf heifers, and like they destroyed the cubicles simply because they're just that bit smaller. They sit in further, and they're gonna, when they pass feces, it just sits right up on that cubicle mat. Relative to the cows, who would be probably that bit bigger, and when they pass feces, it's going into the passageway. So of course it does probably reflect potential issues in your housing, and they can be very expensive infrastructural issues to sort out. And if teat sealing is done properly, now of course there is an alternative to teat sealing, which is disinfecting teats on heifers, which should be about 3 times a week, 3 to 4 weeks out from calving. It gives the exact same results as teat sealing. So there are options out there. You can spray those teats, as I said, run them through the parlour 3 times a week in the lead up to calving. But there's similar results to teat sealing. But in fairness, the results, when it's done well, the results are good, but equal results for both options.
Well, I'm curious now, Gillian, do you get someone in to do it with the rollover crate, or do you do it yourselves, or what's the...
My husband, he's a perfectionist, and he does it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I suppose a similar question here to a previous one. What do you do if you have cows running milk 4 to 5 days after dry off, high yielding cows? Yeah, tricky one. I suppose the big thing is, and I'm sure they do now, try to manage them to reduce the energy and try to get the volume down before drying off. But that's probably the thing that'll have the biggest impact on it. What to do? Again, you're trying to monitor and really go to town in the hygiene. Even if you have to try and separate them and put them somewhere separate, that you can really go to town in the hygiene. I'd be inclined to monitor them and very closely. So how many litres is the ideal for dry off? It probably depends. What heavy criteria? Gillian?
I think it's 12 and under. I think, was Elaine, were you saying 15, or was it, or is it?
No, I didn't mention an amount, but I suppose I would probably say 12 and under. That would be kind of the figure I have in my head. But look, as Dennis says, it kind of depends, The
cow and the parity and all the rest of it. But yeah, certainly if you can get them down to that, I think you have a great chance of drying them off then without them bagging up too much and without any leaking. External sealers. Any comments on external sealers?
Is that the
Do you like the wax that you would put on?
Yeah, I've no experience with that, to be honest.
Yeah, Elaine, have you any experience of it, or did you?
I would be wary of it just because if you don't have good disinfection, obviously you're trapping in dirt there, you know what I mean? But look, I suppose if you're careful with them, they're fine. I don't have that much experience of them really, and I don't think they last that long. I don't think it actually lasts that long.
No, they certainly won't seal. Obviously, they're not going into the teat canal. They won't seal up, but yeah, I think they have a role. Like after your after the tubes or the sealer has gone in, they may have a role there as obviously you want to apply a post milking teat disinfection after dry off, like you were talking about, Gillian, but they potentially have a role there that they'll last a little bit longer than post milking teat disinfection, certainly. So should recently infected cows or persistently infected cows be sensitivity tested prior to dry off to determine which dry cow tube would be best? Yeah, so I suppose we've touched on that already. Elaine, if you want to comment again, I'll be looking at another question.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem cows, they're the ones to pick for sure. Yeah. So during the year, if you have any cases of mastitis or, like you say, coming up to dry off, pick ones that are recently infected or persistently infected, and it gives you the best chance of isolating that bacteria.
I think if you can CMT those cows when you get your milk recording back and find the high quarters in the SCC and the CMT,
Exactly.
you'll really you have a really good chance of finding the bugs that you're looking that you want to find then. So if you're culling high cell count cows, would you give a dry cow tube or sealer only? I suppose this depends. Gillian, do you want to take that one, or what you do?
Yeah, I guess that's a practical consideration as to when they're going, or where they're going,
or where they're going.
So, yeah. I mean, if you're selling them on, obviously you'll have to, you know, well, what you could just put you'll have to notify the person that that they're being moved on to, that there's a withdrawal or withholding period on them. If you've got a high cell count cow, that if you give sealer only to a high cell count cow, you know, there's a high risk that you're just going to be sealing an infection, so you're going to increase the risk of infection there anyway. So it really is like, you know, you have to take practical considerations into, I guess, you know, into that decision, and as to when they're leaving, why, and where they're going, and but if they're being sold on to someone who is going to, you know, in our area, there was a chap that takes cull cows and puts them onto is putting them out onto paddocks to dry up, and not housing them, but is, you know, it's quite an extensive way of managing cull cows. And if the likes of that was going to happen, then, you know, maybe they could, once the person knows that there's a withdrawal period on them, that might be an exit. But yeah, it's you have to take
I suppose, as you mentioned, a big thing here is your compliance. Obviously, you want to be compliant anyway, but especially with Board B, if you're selling cows that are treated, you need to be notifying the person that they're going to that they're still in withdrawal. They're not going to be factory or anything like that. Is once a day milking for a week before dry off a good idea to help reduce milk yield if cell count and lactose are both okay? What's your opinion there, Elaine?
Yeah, sure. Look, I suppose it's not really recommended. Abrupt dry off is the way to go. As Gillian said, look, the diet beforehand, try and get that milk yield down. I would say no to the once a day milking for a week beforehand.
Yeah. Certainly not a week beforehand anyway, because I think you're asking for trouble a little bit there. But I mean, some people, it is a management decision a good bit out, and that's fair enough. But you will see the cell count probably go up, just a physiological rise as the yield goes down anyway. But yeah, I'd agree, Elaine. Do digital CMT devices give reliable information? So I'd imagine these are the conductivity meters, I'd imagine. I have to say I don't have too much experience with them. Have you any experience with those devices that you can milk a quarter into?
I don't know, to be fair.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Is it the same as they're different on the robot? Is it, Dennis?
So the robot does conductivity. So I know you can buy devices that will do conductivity, but it'll only really show up with a case of clinical mastitis that the conductivity will register. And there's also cell count on the robot, and that's more of a fancy CMT. But I'm not aware of a device that you can buy to do it. And I think if you get going at the CMT, and get used to reading it, I think you have to do it and to get good at it, and actually get good at reading it. But tis a very useful, simple tool in the pit, I think. And maybe there's videos on YouTube and things, but I suppose the big thing about it is not the color you're looking for; it's the actual viscosity, and the big thing is to keep moving it to judge the viscosity. Where are we now? Would you use a sealer only on cows with warts on the teats? It's a simple enough one, Elaine.
No, I would, like I said before, any cow that you're anyway, if you have to ask the question, I suppose, look, they need the antibiotic, you know what I mean? It's kind of that's the way I would look at it anyway. If you think there's any risk at all, I would just give the antibiotic.
Yeah, good stuff. So the last question, and it's more of a comment that's after showing up there, is from Maeve, and she says, time to finish up now, Dennis. So, which is fair enough. I think it's 9:10. So,
but you got through all the questions, Dennis. Fair play
we
to
did.
you.
Yeah, we got through all the questions, and the majority of people stayed on. So I suppose a big thanks to Maeve in the background for organising the whole thing as usual. She does a super job. Thanks very much to you, Elaine, as usual again, for a super presentation, and a big special thanks to you, Gillian, for joining and giving a really practical presentation, and I suppose giving us the benefits of your own experience on your own farm, which was excellent. So, and thanks to everyone for joining. And I suppose on that note, we'll finish up. Hopefully we'll be doing another webinar, herd health focused webinar, maybe early to mid-January. We're going to be looking at nutrition over the dry period. So managing the dry cow for a successful spring next year. And we'll have Coleman Purcell, the head nutritionist with Dairy, going to join us that night. So we look forward to it. So thanks everyone, and good night.